Hey, what's going on, everybody? So we get a few more people dropping in. Yeah, if you haven't been on one of these before, thanks for joining us. We're going to put out some word. We're going to talk through a couple topics, or actually one big topic today. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. This is Zoom. There's a little chat. You can go into that chat. You can write questions in there. And once we get done talking, we'll start answering questions. So that's the way it goes. I think we got, who do we got on here? We got Leif, we got Cody, we got Carlos, we got Jack from the Echelon Front Team. So they might be chiming in with their perspective on some stuff. They're out there in the field working. So everyone has different perspectives. We like to hear them all. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and kick this thing off. So probably a topic today that everybody has to deal with. And that topic is supporting policies you don't agree with. Supporting policies you don't agree with. Of course, in the military, luckily, there was never any policies that I didn't agree with. Luckily, that's the way it was. Every single day, I was just completely on board with everything that was being said. No, that's not true. In any organization, you are definitely going to have to you're definitely going to experience policies being imposed on you that you don't agree with. So what did I do? What have I done? What do we encourage people to do here at Echelon Front if there's a policy that you don't agree with? What did I do in the military? What do I do now? You might have some suspicion of what I do when there's a policy I don't agree with, and being that I am an experienced tactical expert, and that I came up through the ranks, and that I have the respect of my troops, and that I am tough and courageous and bold, when there's a policy that I don't agree with, I just go to my boss and I tell him, hey boss, I don't agree with this policy. I'm experienced, I'm smart, I'm down here on the front lines. You don't know what you're talking about, and you should change this policy. Well, if you think that's how I handle policies that I don't agree with, you'd be wrong, because that would be a dumb move. The behavior that I just displayed would not get you anywhere. It offers no solutions, offers no alternatives, lacks any form of humility whatsoever, puts my arrogance and my close-mindedness on display, and on top of all that, it forms an antagonistic relationship with my boss and the rest of the chain of command above me. And to ask the question we ask all the time, when, can you give me an example in the history of the world, was it really awesome to have an antagonistic relationship with your boss? Does that help me when I have an antagonistic relationship with my boss? Does it help my team? Does it help us execute the mission? No. No, it doesn't help me. No, it doesn't help my team. No, it doesn't help us execute the mission. So when there's a policy that I might not agree with out of the gate, I am not going to act like an arrogant blowhard. That's not what I'm going to do. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build a relationship. Try and build a relationship. Now, does this mean I'm a brown noser? No, it doesn't mean I'm a brown noser at all. It means I'm trying to win. It means I'm trying to win. I'm trying to form a relationship with my boss, because as I just stated, antagonistic relationships don't help me. They don't help the team. They don't help the mission. So I'm going to build a relationship. How do I build a relationship? To start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform outstanding. I'm going to execute. I'm going to get the job done. I'm going to get the job done better than their standard. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to prove to them that I know what I'm doing, that I'm competent, that I'm capable. That's what I'm going to do. That's the first part of building a relationship, is outstanding performance. Who gets listened to more? If Cody can't shoot the target right, and he's missing the target while he's shooting, and Leif's hitting eyes all day, and Leif says, hey, no, I think we should think about a different sight for our weapon. Who do I listen to? And Cody says, no, I think we should use this other sight. Who do I listen to? The one that can't shoot straight or the one that's dialing in bullseyes? Of course, you listen to the person that's performing well. We have a relationship with people that are performing well. So that's what I'm going to do. Number one, I'm going to perform outstanding. I'm going to do an awesome job. Even on the dumb things, I did an awesome job when I was in the Navy. Always had a squared away uniform, always had a squared away haircut. The little silly things that don't really matter, guess what? They matter. They want that paperwork done, we're getting the paperwork done. That's what we're doing. So performance counts. That's the first step in building a good relationship. The next step in building a good relationship is figuring out what a relationship actually is and what a relationship is based on. Well, a relationship is based on trust and listening and respecting and influencing and caring. What do I mean by that? Well, if we want to have a relationship, we have to trust each other. If Leif and I don't trust each other, we don't have a relationship. We've got to listen to each other. If Leif and I don't listen to each other, we don't have a relationship. We got to treat each other with respect. If Leif and I don't treat each other with respect, or we don't have respect for each other, we don't have a relationship. We have to be able to influence each other. Because Leif's got to have some influence over me, and I got to have influence over him. If we don't have any influence at all over each other, we don't have a relationship. And lastly, we got to care about each other, because if I don't care about Leif and he doesn't care about me, we don't have a relationship. So trust, listen, respect, influence, and care. That's what a relationship is. So if we want to build that, how do we get people to listen to us? How do we get people to trust us? How do we get people to treat us with respect? How do we get people to be influenced by us? How do we get people to care about us? Well, in order to make that happen, you have to give those things. You have to give those things. You have to give trust. So in this case, you've got to trust that there's some reason for this policy. You've got to listen to the direction that we're being given. You actually got to listen and pay attention to it. You got to respect the authority that's presenting the policy. Show some respect. You got to be influenced by that new policy. Okay, it looks like this is what we're doing. Okay, let's see how we can execute that. And then you got to care about implementing the policy correctly. So what does all that mean? What does all that mean? It means when we get a policy imposed on us, what we do is we actually give it a shot. Actually give it a try, an earnest try. We see how it works. We see what we learn. We see what tweaks could actually make it effective. We see the low points or the negatives about the new policy. We try and figure out how we can hone this new policy. That's what we do. We try and figure out how to make this thing work. We give it an earnest try. And the reason that we're doing this is because we have to figure out that we are aligned with our leadership. That's what we got to do. We got to say, okay, our leadership wants us to do this thing. They've got to want us to do this for a reason. Do they want us to get hurt? Do they want to put us in additional risk? Of course not. Do they want us to be inefficient? No, of course not. They want us to be efficient. They don't want us to get hurt. They want us to be safe. Do they want us to fail the mission? Of course they don't want us to fail the mission. Of course. They want us to do a good job. Of course they want us to be safe. Of course they want us to accomplish the mission, which means ultimately we're aligned. We want to do a good job. They want us to do a good job. We want to be safe. They want us to be safe. We want to accomplish the mission. They want us to accomplish the mission. Ultimately, we're aligned. We're both trying to get the same thing. Now, this is where the issue comes in. There may be some things that happen on the front lines that they don't see. There may be some things that occur on the front lines that the headquarters doesn't see. And there might be some things occurring at headquarters that we don't see and we don't understand. Right? So there can be things that are happening on the front line that headquarters doesn't see and they don't understand. There could be things happening at headquarters that we don't see on the front lines and that we don't understand. So what we do is we do our best. I know everyone says don't assume, but we're going to make an assumption that there's a good reason for this policy. So we give it an earnest try. And we do our best. And now, when we run into some issues, when we start seeing some secondary or tertiary effects, we start asking earnest questions up the chain of command. When the new policy comes out that says we can't wear hats with our uniform on, and we're all out there now getting sunburned, we might say, hey, boss, we've gone 3 weeks now without wearing hats because the new policy says we can't wear hats with our uniforms. And we got people that are out there, we're just getting sunburned. We're baking in the sun all day. Is there a reason why we were told that the new policy came out that we're not supposed to wear hats anymore? And the boss says, well, they looked unprofessional because we got people that wearing different hats all the time and it just makes us look bad. Okay, hey, boss, that makes sense. Hey, what if we get some hats that are uniformed and look professional and they all match and they're squared away and they protect us from the sun? Do you think that might be an option? Because I got a bunch of officers out there right now that are getting sunburned, getting baked in the sun all day. Not to mention, we got a high degree of skin cancer because we're already in the sun a bunch. So can we come up with some options? And boss says, oh, well, we didn't think of that. I didn't know you were out there baking in the sun. I've been sitting in the office for the past 10 years. Forgot what it was like to be out there on the front lines. So when we try something and we run into problems with a new policy, that's when we ask earnest questions up the chain of command. And what we're trying to do is inform them of what is going on the front lines. That's our goal.
Yeah.
To inform them of what is going on the front lines. And also to try and be better informed ourselves about what is happening up at headquarters. We're trying to ask earnest questions about that so we understand more clearly. Because again, we're aligned. Boss doesn't want us to fail. Boss doesn't want us to be unsafe. Boss doesn't want us to get hurt. Of course, boss wants us to be efficient. So there's probably something that they don't see. Or there's something that we don't see. And if we don't have a relationship, we won't be able to transfer this information up and down the chain of command. But all of this starts with doing our best to support the policy and the boss. Now, listen, if you are getting asked to do something that's unethical, immoral, or illegal, or completely tactically unsound or unsafe, yes, you have to object to that immediately. You should object to that immediately. Raise your hand and say, hey, look, this is illegal. This is totally unsafe. We cannot do this. But that should be extremely rare that happens. It almost never happened to me. In my 20 years in the military, it almost never happened that I was getting told to do something that was tactically completely unsound or unsafe. That almost never happened. Should be extremely rare. But here's the thing. Most of the things that come out, they're not that big of a deal. We make them a big deal in our head. We have psychological reactants, right? Where we don't like being told what to do. So when someone imposes a new policy on us, we don't like it. And so we buck against the system. But they're usually not that big of a deal. They're generally not that big of a deal. I've had many, many, many conversations with young SEALs over the year where they come to me complaining about some problem. And I'm like, hold on, you're complaining because you got to wear your boots bloused when you go over to base? Like you're taking my time to tell me that you don't want to spend the 9 seconds that it takes to blouse your boots when you go over to the other side of the base? That's what you're doing right now. And they go, sorry, boss. Yeah, because it's stupid. Most things don't actually matter. We make a big deal out of them because we're used to doing things a certain way. We like the way we do things. We think our ideas are the best. We think we know how to run things better. We actually get offended when someone else imposes some new policy on us. And what we have to watch out for is there's a really good chance that that's just our ego. There's a really good chance that our ego is fighting against the policy. So that's not a good plan. It's not a good plan. Instead, if you run into a policy that you don't agree with, and listen, like I said, the policy isn't some illegal, immoral, unethical, or tactically unsound or unsafe thing. If it's one of those, we obviously stop. But if it's something that we just don't agree with because we think we know a better way or something doesn't make sense, well, actually do your best to execute it. And try and figure out if it's doable, and try and figure out if there's a better way to make that policy happen or to achieve what it is headquarters wants to achieve. Now, sometimes we get the team, or we get a leader that says, well, what the heck am I supposed to tell my team? You know, Jocko, you say be honest with the team, and now we're going to try and do this policy, but I don't agree with the policy, and now I'm going to go tell my team, shut up and do it. No, actually, that's not true. If there's a policy that I don't understand or I don't agree with, what I actually tell my team is, listen, team, hey, this new policy came out. Here's what it is. I'm not exactly sure why this policy's out there. I'm not exactly sure what it is they're trying to get from this policy. And I'm going to talk to the chain of command, and I'm going to try and figure that out. In the meantime, we're going to execute this thing to the best of our ability. The reason we're going to do that is because I want to make sure I have a strong relationship with the boss. I want them to see that our team is competent. I want them to see that our team will make things happen. So that way, when we figure out some parts of this policy that don't make sense, I can actually present them in a logical manner up the chain of command so we can progress this in the right direction. But we're going to make an earnest try at that. That's exactly what I'm going to tell my team. And I've told my team that many times over the years. That's what we're trying to do. And that's what I did my whole career. When I got some policy imposed upon me, did my best to follow the policy. I took notes. Oh yeah, I was a note taker. I would take down man hours that it took to get something accomplished. I would take down the excessive cost that it tallied up. I would write down how much extra time we spent doing this thing and where it set us back on other operational capabilities. I would do my best, but I would show what the negative points were. And I'd be able to present that data, and I'd be able to present recommendations to get policies changed. When a policy needed to get changed, I would follow that policy. I would collect that data. I would then put together recommendations with that data supporting those recommendations, and policies always got changed. The bosses didn't want us to do something that wasn't efficient. They didn't want us to do something that wasn't safe. They didn't want us to do stuff that was dumb. But you have to build that relationship so they actually listen to you. And by the way, listen, if they made us do stuff, they had some piece of paperwork that was going to take us an extra 7 minutes. Guess what we did? We did it. We did it. Build that relationship. If you have a good relationship up the chain of command, they will listen to you. And you can actually, sometimes they're pushing policy on you that's coming from above them. And you know what? They need to push back. They need data. They need information. They need recommendations. You're the one that can actually give that to them. But it all starts with performing well, building that relationship, and then asking earnest questions up the chain of command. This worked for me my whole career, and it still works to this day. So with that, Leif, I don't know if you want to add anything to that. I got a couple stories we could tell about, one of them was we do a certain type of training out in the desert. called immediate action drills. And it's where you go out in the desert and you go on patrol with your platoon, and your platoon targets pop up. It's live fire and you start shooting at the targets, and then you maneuver your element, and it's out in the desert and it's 100 degrees out here in the Imperial Valley of California in the summertime. And it's very arduous, and you got a bunch of gear on, and you're doing this all day, up, sprinting, laying down, sprinting, reloading, sprinting, getting up, getting down, climbing little berms, back up and down. You're doing this for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Very tiring. And a guy at another command got shot doing this training. Got shot, got wounded. Friendly fire, terrible situation, and he didn't have body armor on. And we weren't wearing body armor at the time either. So my boss told me, you need to start wearing body armor when you're doing this training. I want everybody in the platoon wearing body armor. I want all the range safety officers wearing body armor. I said, Roger that, sir. I could tell that he was in a reactive knee-jerk mode. Somebody had been shot, and his immediate thing was, well, to put body armor on. Said, Roger that, sir. We went out. We did a couple runs with body armor, and you could do 1 or 2 runs with body armor. You can, because guys can take that. Maybe 3 runs. Maybe you could do 4 runs with body armor. And then guess what you end up with? You end up with guys that are so totally, completely exhausted that they're not moving quick. They're not thinking straight. They're literally falling out from dehydration. And it ends up being more dangerous than not wearing body armor, which, by the way, body armor, the only thing that'll stop a 5.56 green tip round is that plate. And when you look at the way you're maneuvering, that plate really isn't presented to friendly fire situations. So it did not make sense. I took notes. I wrote down the comments from the field. We showed the number of IVs that were given, the number of people that fell out of the training, showed the perspectives that people would get shot from, even the perspective of the person that got shot. Where were they in relation to the other troops? So what we knew we needed was guys that were more mentally in the game. The range safety officers being able to maneuver quickly, being able to move, 4 or 5 feet or 7 feet very, very quickly was more important than having body armor on. Explain this up the chain of command, and my boss rescinded that policy. So there's one. Tried it. Didn't work, gave good positive feedback up the chain of command. My chain of command listened. The other story is working with Iraqi soldiers, which they made us do, wrote about this in Dichotomy, and pushed back and said, hey, this does not make sense. And when I pushed that back up the chain of command said, yep, Jocko, you have a waiver. You do what you need to do. So those are times that I've had policy imposed on me that didn't make sense, and that's how I handled them. Wrote down what was happening, collected data, pushed it back up the chain of command. Because I had a good relationship up the chain of command listened to me. That's where it starts. All right, Leif, I went on a tangent after I asked your opinion. Let me give it over to you. I'll be quiet.
No, all good. I think those are powerful examples, and this is an excellent topic, and I think particularly for the first responder community, because a lot of first responders that we talk to, fire departments and police departments all the time, that have the same kind of viewpoint. I think for a lot of the frontline leaders that I had, which is like, hey, we get stuff done out here, and the chain of command is, they don't know what's going on down here. And, as Jocko pointed out to me, if you don't have a good relationship with your chain of command, that doesn't help you. It doesn't help your team. It doesn't help anyone. And actually, once I actually kind of put the haterade down and started thinking about, hey, what does my chain of command want from me? Just as Jocko said, they want me to be successful. So, and it's the same thing for leaders as well, too. If you think, well, my frontline troops don't get it, you got to make sure that they understand if there's a policy change or what's actually happening. And you can use that reflect and diminish tactic to say, listen, I understand change is hard, or, hey, I know this might not be the most efficient way of doing things. Here's why we're doing it, so that you can take the time to explain to people and just build those relationships. And I think, as when we hear people that are most frustrated about not being able to push back on a policy they don't agree with, we ask them how often they're pushing back on stuff. And it's generally all the time. It's all the time. And so if, we say when it comes to prioritize and execute, our third law of combat, if everything is important, nothing is important. And so if you're pushing back on stuff all the time, then your ability to influence the chain of command is zero. And if Jocko's telling me to do something, I'm just, every time he tells me to do something, like, it doesn't make sense, or I don't understand why I'm doing it this way, or I don't really like that, or that's not the best way to do things. Then when I actually try to push back on something that really matters, it's just like, well, it's Leif again. Leif just complained about stuff. So I have no ability to influence that situation whatsoever. So I need to be very careful about pushing back. And that's something I learned from Jocko. And just as he just described, to only push back on things when it actually matters. And then when you do push back on something, doing it in a way that's asking earnest questions, and one of the things that stuck out to me, Jocko, when we were running all these sniper overwatch positions in Ramadi in 2006, going into these enemy held areas where, people had this idea of a sniper overwatch position as being like a 2 or 4 man element. And yet we had 100 enemy fighters that might attack our position. So we would go in there with 20 or 30 individuals and lock down a 3 or 4 story building. And that would transition to an overt fighting position. But we had a lot of questions, and we had some pushback to say, hey, why, when you guys get compromised, you should just pull out. And I remember that in their mind, hey, we're now compromised in a sniper position. So the bad guys know where we are. They can attack us, which means we're at risk. In our chain of command's mind, they said, well, why shouldn't you just leave the target building? And so instead of saying, hey, these guys are idiots, they don't know what's actually happening, what we did was understand, hey, why are they asking us to do that? They don't want us to get hurt. They don't want us to get injured. They don't want us to get killed. So I just simply needed to explain to them why. And I remember the conversation with my commanding officer. Hey, sir, if we're behind concrete walls in an overt fighting position where we can defend ourselves, if we're down in the street trying to foot patrol, the enemy's going to be able to easily attack us there. They're easily going to be able to ambush us. He's going to be able to kill or wound us. And I know that's not what he wanted. So even just having those conversations, we were able to come to a resolution where he understood why we were making those calls and why it made sense. So I think a lot of it is just how you approach this stuff, how you push back on stuff, and doing it in a way that's, hey, we're aligned on the ultimate goal of trying to keep our people as safe as possible and enabling them to do their mission. And so that's just simply just climbing that ladder of alignment, understanding where your chain of command is coming from when you do actually push back on stuff. But it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you if you don't have a good relationship with your chain of command, and you don't have any influence up the chain of command. It only hurts you. It only hurts your team. And that was a huge lesson I learned from Jocko, so that I could put the haterade down, get aligned with my chain of command, so we could actually move forward together, and do what we needed to do and get the support that we needed and be successful on the battlefield.
Yeah, that's a good story, Leif. I remember that. And I actually remember the term that they were using that I think added to they were very adamant, like we were doing the wrong thing. And the word they were using was compromised. Like, once you guys are compromised, you need to get out of there. And it was just a different mindset, because for them, for years since Vietnam, if you were on a sniper mission and the enemy knew where you were then compromised and you needed to leave. Well, as Leif just pointed out, that would have been a terrible idea to leave a hardened fighting position to go in the street and get shot up. Didn't make any sense at all. So that's a good point of where we didn't do a good job of explaining to them this different environment. And we could get mad at them. You don't know what you're talking about. But instead say, oh, they don't even understand what we're doing here. That's our fault. Let's explain it to them. Let's explain what the risks are. And then we can overcome that policy. So this is absolutely something that it happens to everybody. It happens in every industry. It happens in every leadership position. There's always going to be a little bit of a disconnect. Sometimes there's a lot of bit of a disconnect between what's happening at headquarters and what's happening on the front lines. So good stuff there. Cody, you got anything?
Yeah, just one thing. I think whether it's law enforcement, military, I think majority of frustrations come from lack of perspective. I can tell you my time in the Marine Corps, anytime I was frustrated about a mission, about a training block, about why we're doing something, it's because I only looked through the lens of my eyes, my perspective. And the more I try to gain perspective on what my boss was going through, why they were doing it, created a sense of alignment, that frustration went away. So try to gain as much perspective as you can, because that perspective will gain that alignment, which what we're trying to achieve.
Yep. So that goes both ways. If you're right now listening to this call and you're in a leadership position, it's your job to explain the perspective to the troops so they understand why this policy is coming down. You're not always, but if you're one of those frontline people right now, you're not always going to have that great leader for a boss that says, oh, I got better make sure that my team understands the perspective. They just say, hey, here's the new policy, execute. So it's your job to say, hey, boss, can I ask a couple questions? I just want to make sure I understand what the purpose of this policy is so I can implement it correctly. And then you can start to get some background and you can understand the why. All important stuff. All important stuff.